Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Always Chasing After Something. This will be Part 20, the second half to Chapter 11. Trains were too slow. Izuku hopped from taxi to taxi, commandeered a few vehicles of his own for some absolutely terrifying joyrides on the highway, and made his way back to Musutafu. He was brutally aware of every passing second ticking closer and closer to 4 in the morning. He couldn't afford to miss this meeting. The first few hours of any kidnapping case were critical. Granted, that was based on the assumption you could track the path the kidnappers had taken, which was kind of a moot point with a warp quirk at play. But still, Izuku didn't think it would be that different now. Bakugo had some leeway. The League wanted him for something, so they wouldn't kill him too quickly. There would have been no point taking him if they were just going to murder him anyway. That didn't mean he hadn't been kidnapped for his quirk or some other experiment. All for One could have already stolen Bakugo's explosions. It might already be too late. And that was just for Bakugo. That didn't touch on Aizawa at all, who hadn't been one of the intended targets. They might have killed him on sight. His heart squeezed painfully at the thought. He cared for the man, more than he had any right to, and he didn't want to think of anything happening to him. There were very few people Izuku considered friends, and Aizawa had managed to worm his way into one of those spots. If he was too late to save Aizawa, he'd find a way to avenge him. But first he had to find him, and that required making it to this meeting on time. Everything was time-consuming. Usually that was something Izuku had more than enough of. A snap of his fingers and the world around him slowed down long enough for him to catch up. That wouldn't do him any good here, and every second felt like it was already too late. How long before the doctor got his greedy fingers into Bakugo and Aizawa? How long until Tomura grew angry and decided to dust them? No, he needed to start thinking of him as Shigaraki. If he could distance himself from the man, he'd be able to react better the next time they met. He had to waste time crossing the city to his safe house to get his gear and more backup knives. 9 would not be enough. And he forgot to properly clean 3 of them last night, and then meet with contact after contact to try and get a little bit closer to the League. It was all taking too long. He did feel better fixing a black face mask over his nose and pulling his hood over his curls. It wasn't the exact same coat he used to have, but it was similar and provided extra pockets in the lining for more knives. The first contact didn't take him seriously. "You're not the real ghost." It took a demonstration of his powers and some threats to their face for him to earn a second contact, and that led to a third, who also didn't want to believe him. "Giron has reached out to you multiple times to compare notes. You've never been interested before. Why now?" The woman had snow-white skin, nearly translucent, and her blue veins glowed under her skin. Despite the summer heat, she was bundled up in a turtleneck and a fur-lined coat. "He hasn't had anything I wanted before," Izuku answered honestly. He leaned back against the alley wall. Not the best place for a clandestine meeting at 8 in the morning, but he was in a hurry. "Now he does." She hummed. "And what can you offer him in return?" This was his gamble. "I've recently been inside UA. I'm sure I can offer him something of value. The place is freaking huge, and the lawn is unbelievably green. They had cameras everywhere. That was about the only useful thing Izuku had learned. They'd been careful not to reveal too much to him, for this exact reason. Not that he couldn't come up with something better if he needed to, but he wasn't planning on needing to. The woman raised her brow. "How did you break into UA?" "A ghost can go anywhere," Izuku answered, a standard response he'd coined a while ago that most people accepted with a snort of laughter. "Can I meet Giron or what?" She hummed and crossed her arms. "What do you want from Giron?" "That's for me and him to discuss," Izuku said. If he revealed he wanted intel on the League, they'd never let him meet their boss. They'd know he was only interested because of the missing student. Giron would too, but Izuku would worry about that when he finally met the man. The woman tapped her fingers on her arm, considering. "I'll check with Giron, see if he's interested in what you're selling. But I make no promises." He rubbed his fingers together, subtly snapping, and repositioned himself with a knife at her throat before deactivating his quirk. "I would promise, if I were you. I'm not wasting my time on a maybe." She glared down at him. "Then maybe you better give me a little more to work with. You think Giron has endless free time?" "Giron knows I'm an info broker. That means he knows I know what information is considered valuable. I want a meeting today." "Don't get cocky, rookie," she snarled. He pressed the blade into her neck. Her skin ripped like paper, and a trail of blood welled over the knife. "Get me that meeting, or I'm going to have a lovely new centerpiece." Her throat bobbed. "All right, you got it. I'll call you when I've got it." Good. He stepped away, flicking blood off his knife. "If you don't contact me by noon, your head is forfeit." The woman snarled at him, revealing pointed teeth. Izuku walked away without giving her a chance to respond. He'd find something to eat while waiting for her to contact him again, and try and dig up what he could about the investigation. He had a laptop with him, the one he always kept in his go bag, and while not as streamlined as the main one he used, it would do for now. His main laptop had been left behind at his apartment the night the Shie Hisaikai attacked him. Once he'd stolen a bagel for breakfast, he climbed to the roof of a library and patched himself into the Wi-Fi. Hiding in a corner with all his gear on would make the librarians nervous, and they'd be more likely to remember him or possibly call the cops on him. Chilling on the roof gave him the privacy and internet access he needed. He did miss being inside, though. Libraries had been his haven his first year on the street. He'd spent all day inside, watching YouTube tutorials on every subject he could. He went from library to library, not staying at one for more than a few days so they didn't get too used to him. He rubbed his shoulder, massaging an old phantom ache from that time. He'd come a long way since then. The internet truly was a magical place. The heat started to get to him after a while, even in the shade of the air conditioning unit. His efforts to hack into the police's League investigation hadn't gotten him anywhere. Hacking was a skill he hadn't cultivated as much as he should have, an oversight he'd deal with after this whole mess was over with. He got lucky, though. The woman from this morning texted him at 11:45, clearly pushing his time limit as much as she dared out of spite. Giron would meet with him at 2 o'clock this afternoon. She provided an address for some unimpressive office building on the other side of town. He went early to scope the place out. It was an old business district, not quite run down, but well on its way. The side streets provided lots of cover for back doors and secret comings and goings. Every window on the street had the shades drawn, preventing anyone from looking inside. It was a place where he'd need to watch his back, but that wasn't unexpected. He chose a rooftop to stake out the address, also finding a decent hiding spot for his bag, so he didn't have to lug it around in case things took a wrong turn, and settled in to wait. The silence pressed around him. 2 months ago, when he'd first rescued Eri and brought her to his apartment, he'd learned it was actually really nice to have someone to come home to know that, at the end of the night, he could see her face and know that he'd made a difference for someone. He'd be out and about and see something that would remind him of her, and he'd grab it in the hopes of getting her to smile. It was nice not to be alone, and to have someone else's needs to focus on. Izuku was going to miss that, when he decided to leave for good. It had been a long time since someone had genuinely cared about him, and not just for the sake of what they'd get out of it. He wasn't sure he trusted Aizawa and Hizashi's motivations yet. They could easily be playing a long game to get something out of Izuku later. But damn it all if they weren't playing the game well. The men almost had Izuku convinced they were sincere. It normally wasn't so hard to pick up and leave with the intention of never seeing someone again. He'd done it to Dabi 6 years ago, and had barely thought of the man ever since. He'd miss Aizawa and Hisashi, though, and especially Eri. She'd come to rely on him so much. Her own personal hero. But like he'd told Kirishima last night, he wasn't a hero. He wasn't even necessarily one of the good guys. He was a classification, all of his own, serving whatever side suited him best in the moment. Eri didn't need someone like him in her life. She'd be better off without him in the long run. He shook his head, forcing his mind to focus on the task at hand. He needed to keep his mind on task, so he was prepared. The panic attack from last night was fresh in his mind. There had to be a way for him to suppress his feelings about the Nomu, so he could raid the League's base later. It'd be pretty pathetic if he snuck in there and then ended up crumpled on the floor at the sight of one Nomu again. This would have been the perfect situation to ask Aizawa for backup. Shame the whole point of this was to rescue Aizawa. He'd just have to do everything he could and make the best choices between here and there. Those choices started with meeting Giron. He climbed back down to street level at 2 o'clock and let himself into the building. A guard aimed a gun at him. This was almost routine, comforting in a way. Izuku knew how to handle situations like this, knew that with his quirk he had complete control of the situation. His racing thoughts calmed as he focused on the situation at hand. He was in his element now. Izuku raised a brow, hands in his pockets and wrapped around knife hilts. "I've got an appointment." The guard raised the gun. "Ghost?" he asked. His pupils were horizontal rectangles like a goat, and horns curved out of his head. His pants bulged in weird spots, and Izuku was willing to bet he had goat legs. Izuku nodded, and the guard waved him through. The inside of the office building was dim, thanks to all the shades blocking the windows. Pale fluorescent lighting did little to help the stale air and grimy walls. The entryway was packed with cubicles, no doubt ideal hiding places for more guards. Izuku was taken down a hallway and through a set of doors, updated compared to the rest of the building with shiny steel hinges and locks. They were in a stairwell, offering even more defensive positions, and Izuku had to wonder what kind of messes Giron involved himself in, if he needed this much security. The second floor of the building was all private offices. Izuku was taken to the far end, where the only set of heavy wooden double doors was. His goat guard knocked on the door. "Enter," a smooth voice called out. Izuku let the guard twist the knob and push open the door before he stepped inside. The door was closed behind him. Not his favorite thing, made him feel trapped and on edge, but it was workable. The office he found himself in was large enough for a big, stately desk facing him and 2 small couches in front of that. A glass coffee table between them. The windows were covered with large landscape paintings to disguise the fact that they had to keep themselves hidden at all times. On one wall was a dry bar, stocked with alcohol of all kinds and brands. Izuku wasn't an expert in drinks, but they looked like top-shelf quality. Beside the desk, arms already crossed and a scowl on her face, was the woman Izuku had met with earlier. A bandage was wrapped around her neck, and she had her own knife holstered to her leg now. Giron himself was seated in a big leather chair, leaning back with his fingers steepled in front of his chest. A laptop was shut in front of him, and any papers were safely tucked away in the drawers or the filing cabinets behind him. "Well, well, the infamous ghost really does have a body," Giron greeted. Izuku raised a brow and let the silence grow. I admit, you're shorter than I thought you'd be, Giron said. And a bit more vicious, too. He gestured to the woman beside him. My dear Eliza deserves an apology. Izuku was not inclined to give her one, but for the sake of this meeting, he offered a quiet one. Apologies for the rough treatment. She narrowed her eyes at him. So, Giron started, standing from his chair and rounding his desk. What kind of information could I possibly offer you that you can't get yourself? Right to the chase, then, Izuku said. Perfect. He didn't want to waste time with small talk, even if it did help feel this guy out. We're both busy people, Giron shrugged. And we're both businessmen. I feel like we know each other already. Izuku disagreed, but he kept that opinion to himself. Giron approached the dry bar. Care for a drink? Pass. If his voice hadn't given away how young he was, his face would. Drinking would require removing his mask, and he refused to do that in front of people. That's a shame. I've got some of the finest liquors here. Eliza? Gin. He poured 2 glasses and walked one back over to Eliza, turning around and leaning against the front of his desk. You've got me waiting in suspense here, Ghost. Now or never. Cards on the table. I want to know where to find the League of Villains. Giron stilled, glass raised to his mouth. Interesting. He took a sip. And why do you want to know? Do you need to know? As it so happens, the League of Villains is a valued client of mine. I don't send just anyone to their door, you know. He was in their pocket. Izuku should have known. Your reputation is for more than just intel. You've broken up a number of black market rings. If you're referring to the traffic rings trading kids around like playing cards, then yes. Very noble of you, Giron said. He set his glass down on his desk. But see, that leads me to wonder what business you have with the League all of a sudden. It's no secret they kidnapped a kid last night. If your only goal is to be a knight in shining armor, you'd be better off turning around and walking back out that door. Somehow, Izuku wasn't surprised it had come to this. How much is keeping this information from me worth to you? Excuse me? Izuku casually strolled forward along the boarded-up windows, looking at the landscapes while keeping one eye on Giron and Eliza. An eye, a hand. Maybe I'll even cut out your tongue. You can always write what I need to know. Are you threatening him? Eliza demanded, setting her untouched glass down with a thud. Gin spilled onto the desk. Both of you, unfortunately, Izuku said, turning away from a mountain landscape. You, dear Eliza, will end up as collateral if he doesn't give me a location. Kill me, and you'll never get the intel, Giron said. He was still too calm and collected, considering the turn this conversation had taken. Izuku wasn't going to need to demonstrate why they should take him seriously. I never said I'd kill you. Cut off some limbs and permanently maim, but not kill. Eliza doesn't have that same protection. Come on, kid. We all know you're bluffing. So, he had figured out that Izuku was younger than he seemed, and he still wasn't taking him seriously. Am I, Giron? Because I gouged out a man's eyes last night, right before sawing off his hand. He sang like a canary for me. Giron hesitated. Izuku casually withdrew one of his knives. These aren't just for show, you know. Neither is mine, Eliza warned, whipping her knife out and moving in front of Giron. Raising a brow, Izuku activated his quirk. He kept his hand hidden from them when he did to hold on to as much of his quirk's secrets as possible. He strolled over and plucked the knife out of her hand, pushing her over onto the floor. For dramatic effect, he circled around the desk and sat in Giron's chair before deactivating his quirk, twirling Eliza's knife in hand. "Your knife might be real, darling, but it's no threat." They took a second to figure out what just happened, Eliza getting back on her feet and looking murderous. "The mystery quirk in action," Giron said, still trying to keep control of the situation. "The one and only." Izuku stabbed the point of Eliza's knife into Giron's desk. "So, are you going to give me a location, or am I going to amputate some limbs today?" Giron narrowed his eyes, considering. "I'm pretty attached to all my limbs. I'll give you the location you want, on one condition." "Conditions might cost you a finger," Izuku warned. "I'm not asking much," Giron said. "Just a promise that you don't tell the League how you found them." Assuming Izuku left any of them alive, he imagined they wouldn't take too kindly to their info broker selling them out. He did feel a small amount of kinship with the man. Izuku was often in a similar position. "Condition granted. Now, the location. And it better be the real location, or your hands are going to be mounted on my wall, holding your own tongue." "Delightful image," Giron stated. "I tell recruits to go to a bar in Kamino. They meet Shigaraki and Kurogiri there. I don't know if it's their only hideout or not." "Which bar?" Izuku pressed. He'd scout around when he got there to see if it was the right place or not. A bar didn't sound like All for One and the Doctor. They were bringing in new recruits, though, so it made sense for them to have one location for the League, while All for One himself was somewhere else. "It was called the Golden Dragon. You'll know it when you see it." The location could have been more descriptive, but Izuku committed it to memory. "Well, this little chat has been fun, and I trust everything we discussed will stay between us, right?" Izuku asked. "Because if the League knows I'm coming, then you won't have to worry about what they'll do to you." Yes, my limbs on your wall. I get the picture," Giron said. "Not just yours," Izuku warned. "I'll dismember every person that works for you." Giron clenched his jaw. "Get out of my office." Izuku rounded the desk. "With pleasure." He strode out of the office, slamming the door behind him. They were too thick to hear any conversation on the other side, so he didn't hang around to eavesdrop on what Giron did next. He had to get to Kamino. All right, listeners, this concludes the second half to Chapter 11 of Always Chasing After Something. Chapter 12 will be up next. I would love to hear your thoughts and reactions to this chapter. In the previous one, we saw more of a focus on Aizawa in the first half to this one, and in this part, we get more of what Izuku is doing, right, with this situation. So drop your comments below for me. Let me know your reactions. Just a reminder, the fic, of course, is located over on AO3, so you can always slide over leaving comments, kudos, and support to the original author as well. I'm sure it's much appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.